My reign as a Jeopardy champion lasted almost 35 minutes.
This was coming, like the waiting room of the vasectomist, and I know that's not what he's called. I know there's like a fancy word, but...
If you leave, I have nothing left to live for.
If you believe in God, then you know that God can communicate with you in mysterious ways, through the actions of individuals or through the manipulation of nature. And if you believe in God and you went to the church that I went to, then you also knew that God could speak to you specifically, in details, with instructions, and in English. We were part of the Pentecostal Holiness Church, or Holiness Church, or Holy Church for short. Our church was a small storefront, used to be a clothing store at one time. And our pastor, Elder Moore, we called him Elder Mo, his full-time job was as a painter or a handyman when he wasn't giving out the word of God on Sundays. Our church consisted of about 50 people, mostly black women, the unliterate, the barely literate, the long-suffering, and the faithful, who came to church every Sunday, gave their money, paid their tithes. Now, I, as a boy, I was a believer. I was a believer because I saw evidence all around me that God actually spoke to people specifically, in detail, with instructions, and in English. Now, where I used to see this all the time was in church. I can remember a dozen times that I seen people stand up in church and say, God spoke to me. And God would tell people things like how to deal with a loss, how to deal with a bad relative, where to find your keys, when to turn off the oven so those biscuits wouldn't get burnt up. But I was a believer, but I also was 12 years old and aware that my stepfather was also a believer who was in the habit of being drunk during the daytime and sleeping a lot. So I allowed my sister Janice to talk me into this idea of putting a walkie-talkie under his pillow. So we went into another room and I put the walkie-talkie under his pillow and I decided I was going to talk to him. So I said, Leroy. And he jumped up and he went, what? Who's talking to me? I said, it's me. Me, who? Who are you? It's God. He said, God? Oh my goodness, oh my God, oh my God. And he fell down on the floor and he started crying. Me and my sister are giggling. I said, Leroy, don't eat no more grits and sausage. He said, what, wait a minute, what are you trying to tell me, God? I said, don't eat no more damn grits and sausage. So he started crying again, and when my mama came home, he ran right up to her and went, and God spoke to me. And she was like, what? You're probably drunk again. And she was pissed because here's another day him wasting, not working, talking about he's seeing God. And they got into a big old argument about it. And she really thought he had lost his mind when they went in the kitchen and he actually threw away all the grits and sausage. Well, I can remember when God really started paying attention to our little church. And this occurred right about the time that these rumors were starting to be spread that Elder Mo was sleeping with and having sex with various women in the church. He was a single guy. Well, I knew that Elder Moore was in the habit of laying on the hands, on top of the clothes, and under the clothes. But to me, I didn't see anything wrong with that at all. Well, one Sunday, God really started talking because the rumors were spreading around. And I remember that Elder Moore went up to the pulpit and he looked like a man possessed. His eyes was bulging out of his head. He was pursing his lips together. He was all excited and all tensed up. And he pointed his finger shaking at Sister Jane. Now, Sister Jane is the lady who had been telling people that she was having sex with Elder Moore. Well, he was still pointing his finger at her, like I'm pointing at you. And he said, God told me in the kitchen to tell Sister Jane to shut her damn mouth and quit telling all those lies. I looked at my mom and go, what's going on? I was hitting her going, she was going, stop. Don't say nothing. Don't say anything about this. I just wanted to know. It's the weirdest thing I ever heard. Well, the next Sunday, God started talking a whole lot. Because that Sunday, Sister King, she testified in church. Now, Sister King was a woman who was also allegedly having sex with the pastor. She was also in the habit of wearing very tight dresses like you, and a lot of makeup, which was not really common in our denomination. Well, we had also heard that there had been an incident between her and Sister Jane, so we were really excited to find out what was happening at church. Well, she stood up in the church to testify, and she said, God told me to go to Sister Jane's house and slap that bitch in her face and tell her to stop telling lies. I looked at my mama and I was going, what does this mean? How does that work? Does God say hit it with the backhand, the front of the hand, slap in the back of the head, go to the back door? And she was going, shut up, stop asking questions. God does whatever he does. You need to stop asking these questions. Be a good boy, shut up. I just want to know. But God wasn't finished talking yet. Because all of a sudden, Sister Mary stands up. Now, Sister Mary also was allegedly having sex with the pastor. But before she spoke, Sister Jane stood up and decided that she wanted to defend herself. She stood up and she said, God told me to lay down with Elder Mo and spread his seed. As soon as she said that, half the people in the church just stood up. It was complete chaos. Elder Moore almost lost his mind trying to get control in the church. Now, this was peculiar to me because up to this point, I had always known that when God spoke to people, it was a rarity. Didn't happen often, and it was always had a profound impact on the church. But this was like 50 times in 2 weeks. And up to that point, personally, I had only heard God talk to me one time. And it was when I was sick. I had a fever of about 105, 106. My belly was really hurting. I was profusely sweating. And I remember that Elder Mo had came to the house and he had rubbed the healing oils on me. And I remember he looked down on me and he yelled out, God, praise this boy and speak to him, heal his body and talk to him, Jesus. Well, with that cue, I looked up and said, God, why is my belly hurting? Why am I so sick? And God said, because you ate that green bologna. Well, there was continuous chaos in the church. And my mama made sure that I go home and she wouldn't give me any information at all about why it was that God had decided to spend so much time with our little church. And I was starting to get worried. I wondered if God knew that I had pissed in the sink the week before, because he was starting to pay so much attention to us. That year, the year before my 13th birthday, would be the last year that I would actually be a believer. I started to come to the understanding that perhaps maybe those people who were saying that God was speaking to them in the church, maybe they were just trying to cover up for sins of the flesh. And when I thought I had heard from God about the green bologna, it was probably just a fever and I was delirious. I no longer believe that God speaks to people specifically, in detail, with directions, and in English. What I believe now is that God speaks to people generally, universally, globally, that God provides light, and people decide how they want to see it and how they want to interpret it. God gives instructions like when to stand up for a cause, when to sit down, when to yield to the absurd, when to go, when to come, and occasionally, when to slap a bitch right in the face. That's your story.
That is Ray Christian.